So every now and then you read or hear about somebody referencing to the Creator as the God of the Old Testament, the God of the New Testament, as if there is a difference, or as if there are two creators or something. Okay? And so you have this guy, for instance, and you notice right away he has long hair. And Paul said it is a shame for a man to have long hair. And in Deuteronomy 31 or 32, I can't remember which one it is, talks about how, I might even be 30. It talks about how he's going to come and destroy the long-haired enemy. So in this particular YouTube video, he actually claims, but he says Yahweh instead of Jehovah. He literally says that the Elohim of the Old Covenant, or he will say Testament, is Satan. Right? Now I'm not going to I'm not going to go and play this because it's blasphemous. But right here you'll see a marker where it says who is Yahweh, introduction of Yahweh, and all of this. And then he says Yahweh is physical. Interesting that he would say that. He goes on to try to prove this by claiming that he couldn't hear or see Adam and Eve when they were hiding from him. Okay? And then, here's another video. El and Yahweh, the two gods of Israel. Well, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read what I wrote up. And this is my statement. There is no such thing as a God of the Old Testament or New Testament. Jehovah Elohim of Israel made a covenant with Israel that Israel broke. The breaking of the Old Covenant caused Israel as a nation to be temporarily cut off and usher in grace for the Gentiles. However, grace for the Gentiles also means grace for Israelites. At that same moment, in advance of the new covenant for the nation of Israel. I've been pointing this out over and over using the scripture in these videos. At the time that the promised new covenant is given to the nation of Israel, the Gentiles will do everything in their power to stop that new covenant, including attempted genocide. And that is shown over and over and over again in the scriptures and the prophets, but also in Luke and Matityahu. All right? So, and if you look up God of the Old Testament and God of the New Testament, you'll see people are like, why does the God of the Old Testament seem so different from the God of the New Testament? All right. You notice how I always say covenant and not testament, because the two words are slightly different. Covenant, or I should say testament, is a testimony. The word covenant means more than just testament. Let's look up the word, shall we? Covenant. I need to find out exactly what the definition of a covenant is. Here. Covenant between them, and that her name was never to be mentioned. A law, a contract drawn up by a deed, a clause in a contract, an agreement which brings about a relationship of commitment between not God, because as I've pointed out to you many times, God, or Gott, is the national idol, pagan idol, of the Germanic and English-speaking peoples. But it's between Jehovah and his people. The Jewish faith is based on biblical covenants made with Abraham, Moshe, and David, is what they're saying here. Now, let's look at the word testament. A person's will, especially the part relating to a personal property, a father's will and testament. Something that serves as a sign or evidence of a specified fact, event, or quality, growing attendance, figures, or a testament to event's popularity. Three, a division of the Bible, testament, plural nouns, testaments, a copy of the New Testament. He was able to buy a testament. Middle English from Latin testamentum, a will. From testare, testify, in Christian Latin also translated in Greek, diakethi, covenant. So they have different meanings. Notice how Christians avoid the word covenant, instead use testament. That should make you pause. So, now what I want to do is show you, there was something, I want to show this. So these two individual videos that claim that the Elohim of the Old Testament, as they say, or more correctly should be said, the Old Covenant, they claim he is Satan. Now, where did that start? Well, it started in the 2nd century CE. In the 3rd century, let's see, was it the 4th century? 4th century being the 300s, right? So in the 2nd century, what I mean is that's when the Christians went full-on rebellion against Jehovah and against the real Moshiach. But in the 2nd century CE, a figure by the name of Marcion of Sinope, his teachings have been dubbed Marcionism. They pose such a profound threat to early Orthodox Christianity that they precipitated more precise formulations of the Christian canon and creed. What was this? Well, we'll continue. He was born in Sinope, Pontus, around the first decade of the 2nd century. He was a ship owner and likely prosperous. Around the mid-2nd century, he arrived in Rome, where he became associated with Christian community. Marcion's ideas diverged starkly from those of early Christian orthodoxy. Central to Marcion's teaching was a radical distinction between the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament in Marcion's view. Do you see a pattern here, folks? So this concept came from all the way back to the 2nd century CE. The dualistic theology he proposed two gods, a wrathful and vengeful God of the Old Testament, whom he termed the whatever, I don't know what that word means. And on the opposite side, a loving, forgiving God revealed by Jesus in the New Testament. Now, the congregations rejected this. But, as we know, in 325, Christianity under Constantine completely rejected anything Jewish, including their Elohim and including their Moshiach. They did. I proved it. In fact, what I will do is I will go to my BitChute channel. And by the way, the reason why I'm doing this video is because I believe right here somebody pointed me to that particular video. He said Yahweh is Satan, and he puts this link in here. And so I told him, I replied, I'm going to do a video of the Marcion Heresy, which is apparently the heresy you and incidentally all modern Christians have adopted, and when I am finished, I'm going to delete your comment. Well, I'm going to delete it right now. Why? Because this doctrine is blasphemous. So he is now deleted off of my YouTube channel, or my BitChute channel. But unfortunately, they keep. See, I'll post these videos and then they will repost them from YouTube, unfortunately, but it is what it is. Christians rejected all things Jewish, and Constantine's creed injects anti-Semitic curse into all Christians. Okay? So this particular video, you'll find it on YouTube and on BitChute. Alright? So let me get back to where I was. We'll turn this off real quick. Alright. Now, so proof. I'll provide you more proof that they rejected the Elohim of the Old Covenant, and in doing so, they also have rejected the Elohim of the New Covenant, and I will show you why. Now look. So here in Martin Luther, now, the United States of America, for example, is majority Protestant. Well, Protestantism is where the are followers of Martin Luther. Because Martin Luther, was the father of Protestantism. You can look it up and you will find it. Now look, let me show you in the 3rd page of Luther's Von Shem Hochmaforisch. And I will start right here, because just as we need to teach and write of the devil, has hell and sin, and what they are and do, not what we wanted to make from the devil an angel, from hell a heaven, from death a life, from sin holiness, which is impossible. But the fact that we watch out for them, so I also write on the Jews, because a Jew or a Jewish heart is so stone hard, hard as iron, devilish hard, it cannot be moved in any way. So what he is saying is that even the Creator himself cannot convert them. He says they cannot be moved in any way. Listen carefully to what where his lack of faith is. If Moshe and all the prophets came to do all the miracles in front of their eyes, that they should leave their hardened mind, as he says, Christ, and the apostles did before him, it would be in vain if they were also punished so cruelly that the streets ran full of blood, that one would expect to count their dead not by 100,000, but by 10,000, and as had been done to Jerusalem under Vespasian and bitterly with Hadrian, still they must be right if they also after these 1,500 years, still another 1,500 years should be in misery. Yet as he says, God must still be a liar, and they are truthful. In summary, these are the children of the devil, damned to hell. This is what he says about the Jews. Okay? Now, this is the reason why Christians get so offended when I read to them Romans 11. Because Paul disputes this in Romans 11. He brazenly and openly disputes this lie that the Romans have had since he was talking to them before Paul died. However, if something human is in them, then to such may this writing come to benefit and good. Whoever will may hope for the whole bunch. I have no hope. Neither does the Scripture know of any. Neither does the Scripture know of any. Then he says, we cannot even yet convert the great majority of our Christians. What he is saying is, he can't convert the Catholics to Protestantism. So we must be content with a small handful. How much less is it possible to convert all these children of the devil? Therefore, such is a delusion and nothing that many think that all Jews will be converted at the end of the world, coming from the 11th chapter of the book of Romans, for Paul means something entirely different. What, pray tell, does Paul mean? O liar, unbelieving, and faithless father of Protestantism, Martin Luther. When Paul says in Romans 11, starting in verse 25, for I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, that partial blindness happened to Israel until the time of the Gentiles, the sands of the time of the Gentiles, their hourglass is filled up. Meaning their time has come to an end. And so all Israel shall be saved. How? How shall they be saved? For out of Zion shall come the deliverer, who is the Moshiach, or as you Christians might say, Messiah, who will turn unrighteousness from Jacob, because this is my covenant unto them, as written in Jeremiah 31, verses 31 through 34, which Martin Luther claims it is nowhere written in the scripture. And not only that, Paul quoted the same in Hebrews 8, verses 8 through 12. Apparently, Martin Luther does not know the scripture. He errs not knowing the scripture. Who shall turn away unrighteousness from Jacob, for this is my covenant with them, Israel, when I shall take away their sins. How is he going to do this? Well, you see, the secret to Israel's, the Jews' unbelief is they will tell you what it is. It is not a secret. If a Moshiach comes and does not save Israel from the Gentiles, does not gather them back in, and does not restore the kingdom of David, then he's not a Moshiach. So how then do you make the Jews believe? It's really simple. You go and save Israel, gather them from the land of their enemies, as written in Ezekiel 38 and 39, as written in Isaiah 60, as written in Isaiah 66, as written in Isaiah 4, 14, Zechariah 9, Zechariah 14, Deuteronomy 30, Haggai 2, that's what will cause them to believe. We've gone over and over and over and over again. In Ezekiel 39. Why haven't Martin Luther, the Catholic Church, or these false prophets who claim that Jehovah is the devil, Ezekiel, if I can find it, 39. It's very plain and clear when he's going to save Israel and how he's going to save Israel, and that him saving Israel and gathering them out of their out of the lands of the Gentiles is going to cause Israel to believe, and that they will not believe until that day. It's right here. And verse 21, and I will set my glory among the Gentiles, and all the Gentiles shall see my judgment that I have executed, and my hand that I have laid upon them. So, why? So that the house of Israel shall know, not the Lord, but Jehovah, Elohim, from that day and forward. And the Gentiles shall know that the house of Israel went into captivity for their iniquity. Now listen. He says they, Israel, shall know Jehovah Elohim from that day and forward. Not beforehand, but from that day and forward. So how dare Martin Luther excoriate, curse, and call the Jews children of the devil, when the scripture makes plain that on the day of Ezekiel 38 and 39, and not until then, is Israel going to believe. How dare he dispute with the scriptures, as if somehow that he is holier than the prophets, or the one who told the prophets to write these things himself. Now, he says, on top of that, he says, I'm going to bring back the captives of Jacob and have mercy on the whole house of Israel, as all 12 tribes, and be jealous for my holy name's sake, after they bore their shame and all the trespasses where they have trespassed against me. Have they borne the shame of their trespasses? Yes, they have. So now is time for redemption and mercy for Israel. When they dwelt safely in their land and none made them afraid, I'm going to bring them back and return them from the people and gather them out of their enemies' lands, and I will be sanctified in them in the sight of many Goy, Gentiles, and they shall know Jehovah Elohim caused them to be led into captivity among the Gentiles, and have gathered them back into their own land, and have left none of them behind. Neither will I hide my face from them any more, because I have poured out my Ruach upon the house of Israel, says Adonai Yehovah. Now, so furthermore, this is proving to you that Marcionism invaded the church and became church doctrine as of 325, because I pointed out to you in those videos that they rejected everything Jewish, including the Jewish Messiah, including the Jewish Elohim. And they went to their national idols. The Latins went back to Deus. The English and the Germans went to their old national pagan idol, Gott, or Gottaz. And they call him today God. This is what they did. This is the reason why they cannot get away from God of the Old Testament versus God of the New Testament. Because you see, it's all based on falsehood. It has a false foundation, the foundation of Marcionism. Where was I going now? Oh, yes. So in this particular book, Luther's Von Shem Hamaforish, he accuses the Jews of not being willing to share their real name, and he even mentions it in this book. Except he puts the letter J on it like the JWs do. I'm going to tell you that my belief that using the sound, the J sound with Jehovah is actually a racial slur. I will leave it at that. Because they use the term Jew, and the actual term for a Jew is Yehuda. All right. So, the city of Wittenberg contains a Judenzahl from 1305. Now, who then made this abominable image? It was the Catholic Church who did this. In this case, Martin Luther agrees with the Catholic Church. On the facade of the Staatskirche, the church where Martin Luther preached, it portrays a rabbi who looks under the sow's tail and other Jews drinking from its tits, an inscription reading Rabbini Shem Hamoforish. In German, orthography for Shem HaMaphorish of the rabbi mocking the tetragram, they're accusing the rabbi of mocking the tetragram to be a pig. The sculpture is one of the last remaining examples in Germany of medieval Jew baiting. Okay, so what I want to point out, yes, I'll continue. In 1988, on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the Kristallnacht, debate sprung up about the monument, which resulted in the addition of a sculpture recognizing that during the Holocaust, 6 million Jews were murdered under the sign of the cross. Now, I'm going to say something to you Christians, you cross worshippers, that's going to make some of you lose your minds. But before I do, I want to show you what your followers, what your father, the one you follow, said about the real Elohim of Israel. In Von Shem HaMaphorish, the one that I just read to you, Luther comments on the Judenzahl sculpture at Wittenberg, echoing the anti-Semitism of the image and locating of the Talmud in the Saul's bowels. Here he said, "Here in our church in Wittenberg, a sow is sculpted in stone. Young pigs and Jews lie suckling under her. Behind the sow, a rabbi is bent over the sow, lifting up her right leg, holding her tail high, and looking intensely under her tail into her Talmud as though he was reading something acute or extraordinary, which is certainly where they get their..." I'm not even going to say that with what he said. He essentially accused the Jews of getting the name of that same name that I tell you is the real name over and over and over and over again. He says that name they get from under the sow's tail, or in the bowels of the sow. So that shows you how much Martin Luther, hated that name. Hated Shem Yehovah. Because what you need to do is go and find out what Shem means name. HaMaphorish means the explicit. So Shem HaMaphorish means the explicit name. Now you know that the entire Protestant religion and also the Catholic religion is guilty of blaspheming the holy name, the explicit name. Not only that, this particular sign, the addition of a sculpture recognizing that during the Holocaust 6 million Jews were murdered under the sign of the cross. What this means is that you worshipers of the cross, you carriers of the cross, you people who go to church and bow down to the cross And even those who make mention of the cross in a positive light are guilty of murder. That's what this particular sign, this sculpture, is stating, that you Christians are guilty of murder. These 6 million Jews murdered under the sign of the cross. And Paul warned against this. The doctrines that the Romans had, he warned them over and over and over and over again in Romans 11. But the Romans did not listen. So the Romans did a switch up. See, they became the children of Cain. They became the children of the devil. They didn't have to be. But because they murdered these Jews, who Paul said, we'll go right here. There's no justification for murdering Jews. Paul points this out. No justification at all. He was telling the Jews, he said, if the first fruit, which is Yehoshua HaMoshiach, is holy, then the lump is also holy. Well, what is the lump? Has Jehovah, not God, cast away his people? No. Because I'm an Israelite of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin, Jehovah has not cast away his people who he foreknew. But you Christians declared that the Jews are cast away. And you murdered the Jews under the sign of the cross. When you go down here, he says this. If the first fruit is holy, then the lump is also holy. So that means if you murder the Jew, then you have also murdered the first fruit, the Moshiach. If you murdered the branches, then you murdered the root. Because it says, if the first fruit is holy, the lump is also holy. And if the root is holy, so are all the 12 branches. And if some of them were broken off, and so that you, being a wild olive, you were grafted in, on, at, by, and with them, not replacing them. See, this is where you got it wrong, you Gentile. You said you replaced them. No, you did not. You see, Abel and Cain could have lived together, but Cain said no. Cain said he must murder Abel. This is what you Romans, you Christians, you under the sign of the cross have done, are guilty of. And you were supposed to, with partaking jointly, right here, you can see it right there, of the root and the fatness of the olive tree. Boast not against you don't even speak a word against the branches. But what did you do? What did you do? You set out to murder them. You completely disobeyed the words of Paul. Paul says, if you disobey his words in this manner, he's also going to cut you Romans off. He predicted it a long, long time ago. He told you that this was going to happen and that Israel would be gathered back in. You will say, then the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well, because of unbelief they were broken off, and you stand by faith. Do not be high-minded, but fear. But you weren't fearful. You were not afraid. You set out to go and destroy and murder and genocide the Jews. Over and over and over and over, and it just did not stop. And you're going to try it again. For if Jehovah, not God, spared not the natural branches at all, he's not going to spare you either. Spare not you. Look at the excellence, uprightness, and the severity of Jehovah on them which fell severity. And you think you can escape severity? You think you're going to escape severity? You are the one who's delusional. But toward you, uprightness, if you continue in uprightness, otherwise you also shall be cut off. And when you Romans are cut off, and they will no longer abide in unbelief, they will be grafted in. And why are they no longer going to be abide in unbelief? Because Ezekiel 38 and 39 are going to happen. Guaranteed. For Jehovah is able to graft him in again. But you see, Martin Luther said there he is not able to do it. That is lack of faith, lack of belief, and refusing to believe the truth. And you know what's going to happen to those who refuse to believe the truth and believe the lie. For you were cut out of the olive tree which is wild by nature, and you were grafted contrary to nature into a cultivated olive tree. How much more shall these which are natural, they naturally belong, be grafted back into their own olive tree? For I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own conceits, that partial blindness has happened to Israel until the fullness of the hourglass of the Gentiles comes. And so all Israel shall be saved. All. That means every kind of Israel. No exception. Shall be saved. As it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, who will turn away unrighteousness from Jacob, because this is my covenant unto them when I shall take away their sins. So you see, the unbelief, as concerning, as they say, the gospel, they are enemies for your sakes, but concerning the election, yes, they are the elect for Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov's sakes, and also for Moshe's sakes, and also for the prophets' sakes. For the gifts and calling of Jehovah cannot be changed, cannot be repented of. You see, you Gentiles in times past have not believed, yet you have now obtained mercy because the Israelites do not believe. So now these that do not believe, because you got mercy, also shall obtain mercy. So that means if you don't want mercy for Israel, then your mercy that you receive now will be revoked, and revoked permanently. Because Jehovah has concluded all in unbelief, so that he might have mercy upon everyone. But you didn't want mercy upon the Jew. So you're not going to get any. And you're going to do it to yourself, to each other, is what you're going to do. So I believe I am finished with this video.